Hello everyone, my name is Ngabo Terry from Hope Senior School, Nakirebe, and with me are my teammates Chomuhendo Karis, Namukobe Elizabeth, and Ngabo Lance.
Today, our resolution is this house believes that creative sectors should receive more government support at the expense of traditional sectors. As a team, we expect to win and expect high level of transparency and proper judgment.
Don't raise your voice, improve your argument. My name is Nakirebe, and for this debate, I'm going to be the second speaker. This is Nsima Elizabeth. For this resolution, she will serve as our first speaker. Now Martha, she's going to serve as our third speaker for this resolution. And then the last and the fourth speaker shall be Akrawa.
So our dear viewers, we are going against Hope Secondary School Subi Watoto. And the resolution we are debating is this house believes that creative sectors should receive more government support at the expense of traditional sectors like agriculture in Africa. And we are going to be affirming this motion, and we truly hope for nothing but the best. We have heard a lot about our opponents, but we also bring fire to the game. We can't wait to go against them, and we hope you enjoy the debate. Thank you so much.
House rules. Each speaker has 5 minutes. The first and last minutes are protected. The judge will ring a bell to signal the protected time. The bell will ring continuously after 5 minutes.
Okay, for the purposes of this debate, creative sectors are going to be sectors that are going to be industries that rely on individual creativity, skill and talent to produce goods and services with cultural, artistic or innovative value, right? And then the traditional sectors are going to be industries that are established and typically based on older forms of production, and they often rely on standardized mass production methods, right? But then let's first look at the examples of what the creative sectors look like. Creative sectors, we have things like digital arts, right? Digital arts include things like digital paintings and illustration, virtual reality. We have things like digital photography, NFT art, and the rest. And then we have things like music, whereby we are having several artists who have achieved global success. For example, people like Tyler, Burna Boy, Asake, Diamond Platnumz, and all those people. And then we have the film industry, where we have things like the Nollywood industry, whereby we have Uganda industries, mainly relates on things like making films that are being broadcasted and being viewed like in the outside world, right? Now moving on to like also characterizing what government support looks like. It looks like firstly investing in the creative industry infrastructure, whereby they're going to build things like studios, whereby they're going to build schools like Artfield Institute of Design, so as to like teach these things in schools. We're going to strengthen intellectual property rights, where people can own the things they create from their property. Then they also are going to provide financial support for creatives, include creative education in the school curriculum, and then promote African content on global platforms, right? Like it has been done for the traditional sectors, but then it's going to be mainly done more on the creative sectors, right? Then setting the parameters of this debate. We believe that the parameters of this debate are going to be set in Africa as already predetermined by the motions. But then we're setting parameters to also the traditional sectors we are going to be discussing, to mainly 4 of them. Firstly, agriculture. Secondly, tourism. Thirdly, fishing. And fourthly, mining. Why? Because these are the predominant sectors in African nations that are considered to be the backbone, and they receive most of the government support. Any sectors they want to bring up are actually negligible and do not receive a considerable amount of government support at the end of the day. But then, what is the problem in this debate? We have 2 problems in this debate. Firstly, on the fact that the traditional sectors have not been sustainable But then also secondly, as the world evolves, those traditional sectors are dying out. Why have they not been sustainable? They've not been sustainable because when you look at a sector like agriculture, mining, we normally export under-processed goods that are of poor quality, and they cannot compete on the global scale. That's earning us very little money at the end of the day. If they want to come and tell us that these sectors have sustained us, they should tell us why we have relied on them, and we are still third world countries, yet countries like New Zealand have relied on agriculture, and they are among the first world countries at the end of the day. Moving on, Chair, to then expanding on the second problem on why these sectors are dying out. These sectors are dying out because firstly, climate change. Climate change has affected agriculture, it has affected things like fishing, and also things like tourism at the end of the day. But then we have overpopulation and industrialization, which have then taken land for mining, agriculture, and that we don't have any more land to carry out these products. But then the most important thing is that the youth are no longer interested in these things. That's why you see a youth is going to opt to go out to Saudi Arabia to work as a maid rather than to go and carry out agriculture in their own village at home, right? Meaning that the youth are no longer interested, so we do not have labor at the end of the day. But then, Chair, what's the main argument you're going to get from my speech and the rest from the second speaker? The fact that we solve these two problems at the end of the day. How do we solve the problem on sustainability? We get more money. Why do we get more money? Notice, Chair, that the reason why they don't get more money on their side of the house is that the goods they are producing cannot compete on the global scale. On our side of the house, we have something like African culture. African culture was marginalized, but then now it has come up because of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's seen as something that is interesting and exotic, meaning that it is considered more valuable than things like the French Revolution at the end of the day. Therefore, Chair, there's a reason why we're going to get more money, because people are interested in consuming our cultures.
So my speech begins in 3, 2, 1. So basically, this motion is basically stated around this House believes that sectors, the creative sectors, should receive more government support at the expense of other sectors. So basically, this specific motion is what Team Affirmative comes here and puts on the table today is that we should actually invest in these sectors. They should invest in their creative sectors more. And their justification is that we cannot compete on the global scale because we're having problems of climate change and unprocessed products. But let's look at where they are stemming from in order to come up with this creative sector, in order to come up with like the reason as to why they should invest more in their creative sectors. Let's look at what is going to happen in their house in the long run. Now, on our side of the house, we all know that different creative sectors have been the backbone for these different African countries. Now, let's look at which African countries are utilizing things like agriculture. Things like agriculture, which are actually the most like creative sector biggest traditional sector that's being used like in status quo. Like most of African countries rely on agriculture, which is 68%, meaning that they are telling us that we are producing unprocessed products. But you're talking about the market. Now they're talking about how the global market trends are not being set. Now let's look at this in this way. Now, when we look at our side of the house, they are going to like lose some. They're talking about losing investment, and yet Africa is relying on it as a main source of investment. And they're talking about talent-based employment. I expected the structure of this motion to be primarily rotated around what is going to happen if you put a sector at the expense of another sector. Now let's look at that. That's Team Negative's burden. Now, when you give a sector more government support at the expense of another sector, you're going to like have some sort of like economic recess in the long run. Those sectors don't stabilize or don't stay stable at all times. Now, when I look at the structure of their creative sectors, talk about things like music, which put Africa on the market. But let's look at it in the long run. There's a competition on global market for different things like music, like dance, like arts, and those different specific cultures. Now, in the long run, what you're going to see on their side of the house, you're going to see like things like economic recess in case we don't meet the global competition standards. And in the long run, this is going to lead to like some sort of, we don't have any other, if one sector is given support in the expense of another, we are not going to be able to like have some sort of like balance between trade. When you don't have a balance of trade, you're going to lead to economic recess. And when like one sector is not having some sort of balance, or like in the long run, you're going to like have you're going to like lose out on investing in the other sector specifically. This means that you are trying, if in case you're losing economy, like in case we don't like meet the global trends on creative market standards. As they sit in their house, they think that they were meeting global trends or global like standards, but their preferences change in the long run. This basically means that on their side of the house, there's some sort of loss of stability in sort of their balance of trade, and their economic structure is poor in the long run. So what was our standpoint on today's debate? We primarily stand on the point that no industry deserves to be put at the expense of another.
Okay, my question is, how do you people have balance of trade, yet your goods cannot compete on the global scale?
Now, if we're talking about goods that can't compete on the global scale, let's look at it in this way. Now, when you look at your goods in terms of preferences keep changing in times of matter. This basically brings me back to your side of the house. When you invest more in creative sectors, you're actually going to like have some sort of imbalance when you don't meet the market preferences after some point in time, which takes it to my end. I keep to tell you that you need to like have some sort of balance of trade if you want to have meeting government standards, met in your side of the house. Okay, in order like for you to be able to like have that balance of trade in your specific side of the house. So our particular standpoint, as I said again, is no industry reserves to be put at the expense of another, because like you will have some sort of economic crisis in the long run in case you don't meet global competition standards, because preferences keep changing in the long run. You're going to have problems on your side of the house. Just rest my case.
This is the High School Crossfire. We'll be back in a minute.